The Capitoline Hill, where the monumental complex of the Campidoglio stands, has a history going back thousands of years, linked to its importance as the religious and political centre of the city of Rome. Archaeological excavations have in fact discovered traces of settlement of the hill as far back as the Bronze Age, in the middle of the 2nd millennium BC. Originally, the summit of the hill was marked by two wood-cloaked uplands, divided in the middle by a small valley, which tradition holds was the location of the mythical asylum set up by Romulus to accommodate the inhabitants from the nearby settlements. The southwestern height was called Capitolium, while that to the northeast was known as Arx, because of its function as Acropolis. In historic times, the Campidoglio became the sacred Acropolis of the city. The last of the Roman kings, the Tarquins, built the temple of Capitoline Jupiter, which was inaugurated in 509 BC. On the upland where the Basilica of Araceli now stands, the temple of Juno Moneta was built, site of the mint of the Roman state. Other temples and sanctuaries were also constructed, further emphasizing the sacred character of the hill. In the Republican age, the most illustrious families competed in the construction of public buildings designed to express their prestige and political influence. In the medieval period, the antique buildings fell into disrepair, but the written sources perpetuated the memory of the ancient splendor of the site. The classical tradition, which lived on in the medieval city, was also expressed in the government of the commune, which was set up in 1143 following an anti-papal revolt. The palazzo, built over the ruins of the Tabularium, became the site of the Renovatio Senatus, the restoration and rebirth of the ancient Roman Senate. The long history of the Roman commune led to the establishment of a number of magistracies. These magistrates were in charge of the government of the city, initially in an anti-papal spirit, but later by agreement with the Pope. The most important of them, the senator who administered justice and the conservators who dealt with the civic finances, had their headquarters in the palazzi of the Campidoglio, which were thus named after them. The renewed political role of the hill in the Middle Ages was centred on the sites of the Basilica dell'Araceli, where the guilds also met, and Palazzo Senatorio with its high bell tower. At this time, a large loggia, open to the square, was built onto the palazzo and became the marketplace. The new urban and civic significance of the Campidoglio was marked by a radical shift of perspective. Effectively, while in Roman times the most important monuments on the hill had been built facing the Forum, or the centre of the city, now the Campidoglio opened up towards the Campus Martius. In the 14th century, the Palazzo Senatorio was transformed into a fortress complete with towers. Most likely dating to the same period is the monumental transformation of the old Palazzo of the Banderesi, the captains of the civil militia, into the premises of the governors known as conservatori. In the Renaissance, the events involving the papacy once more exerted a profound effect on the history and the structural and artistic evolution of the Capitoline Hill. Thus, the Campidoglio became the stronghold of the celebration of the history and memory of the city's ancient grandeur, and the Vatican, as the seat of the papacy, the site of the manifestation of its power. This helps us to understand why, in 1471, Pope Sixtus IV donated the ancient bronzes conserved in the Lateran as a sign of restitution to the Roman people of the traces of its antiquity. These statues included the Capitoline she-wolf, which with the addition of the twins was to become the symbol of Rome, in memory of the legendary story of the origins of the city. In 1538, Pope Paul III Farnese decided to transfer the equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius from the Lateran to the Piazza of the Capitol, and entrusted the arrangement of the sculpture to Michelangelo. The statue, the marble base of which was sculpted by Michelangelo himself, became the fulcrum of the piazza, charged with symbolic significance and historic prestige, as well as being a decisive presence even in a spatial sense. The program for the overall redesign of the area of the Campidoglio was not concluded until after the death of Michelangelo, with the completion of the Palazzo Nuovo about 100 years later. This renewal began with the facade of Palazzo Senatorio, where the monumental double staircase was built, later further embellished by the imposing statues of the rivers Tiber and Nile, and by a fountain. In the second half of the 16th century, the two Capitoline palazzi, the Palazzo Senatorio and the Palazzo dei Conservatori, were provided with a new facade featuring common architectural elements, including the giant pilasters with Corinthian capitals and the balusters crowned by antique statues. The interior of the Palazzo dei Conservatori was also extensively modified. The courtyard was straightened and the monumental staircase built, while the formal reception rooms were arranged differently and became known as the appartamento or apartment. The slight divergence between the layout of the Palazzo dei Conservatori and that of Palazzo Senatorio and the central axis of the piazza suggested that for the sake of symmetry, the architectural design of the piazza should be completed with the construction of a similarly divergent twin palazzo on the opposite side of the square. Work on what was called the Palazzo Nuovo or New Palazzo, opposite that of the Conservatori, was only concluded in 1667. After this, the new museum premises, destined to house the Capitoline collections of antiquities, were not inaugurated until 1734. The finishing touch to Michelangelo's project, in the form of the star-shaped design of the paving, was finally added in 1940, in the course of the major excavation works performed to carve out the underground gallery connecting the three palazzi on the hill.